let's call this meeting to order. We'll start with roll call. So is Danielle Bailey here?
Here.
And Ben Wynn is here. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so let's go on to the 2022-23 calendar.
Yes. So I know this is not something we've ever talked about before. Obviously, we've had some conversations around this. So we wanted to just bring it back through, continue conversations and determine whether or not there was anything that we would then bring to the April board meeting. So I met with Jenica and she put some things together, just looking at what some other districts are doing. We really talked about that perhaps thinking back on it, we should have probably started with like, here's what we mean by professional development and here's what we mean by like how we would use this time and just getting to some more specifics on that.
Hey,
so
sorry, can you mute everyone?
Yeah, how do I do that? Yeah, I can figure out how to do that. Oh. All right, so you probably have to unmute now. So basically, I'm gonna, Jenica created this fabulous document, so I'm gonna let her just kind of walk through that. And if you guys have questions, additional questions along the way, just pop in and let us know. And then we can see if there's any space to continue discussion, I guess, at this point. So I will hand it off to you, Ms. Westfall.
All right, thank you. So we just wanted to just put something in a document, an easy read document. So even for families, for the school board, just not utilizing all the school language. So clearly in the beginning, we kind of just define professional development a little bit for staff and why we have a need for it. So that's kind of in that first paragraph. So even looking at our ESSER survey and then some of the categories in the strategic planning interviews, it was a real theme that kept coming up over and over again, the need for additional learning for staff. I'm going to adjust my screen here real quick. All right. And then also we talked a little bit too in the second session is what are some options that we could utilize to help support staff and not just staff, also, you know, as the whole system as we grow. So that would be administrators as well, because they should be learning and with the staff as well. So there's different options there. There's the twice a month, which was previously brought to the board for 3 hours of early release. An additional option of the 1.45 hours, that would be a weekly, and then full day once per month. So kind of going through that, and then what are, you know, some of the pros and cons to that. And it's previously been shared, you know, by Allison and other members, just, you know, the consistency of having it on a consistent basis is very supportive of staff learning, and then also being able to make fine tuning and making adjustments to our instructional practices in order to benefit our students the best. So I know there's a lot of talk around learning loss and, you know, worry around losing minutes and losing instructional time. But if we're doing pre-planning and we're being proactive in our planning, that really does support that learning. So we're not doing lessons that we may not even need to do. So I think there's a lot of time and intention in this work. So not only for our students who may have learning loss, but then also our students who need extension. So we're really spending some time having discussions on planning for each individualized student. This also gives time to do some planning around social emotional learning and any sort of needs in that end too. So staff can kind of get together where it's not just grade level teams or content teams. It gives us an opportunity for our SEL staff, our SST team, to kind of dig in and help support some of that work as well, whether it's forming groups of students, getting clubs going, lunch bunches, helping support teachers with different strategies within the classroom. So it just provides a lot of opportunity for growth all the way around.
And I did include the number 3, which is the full day once a month. I know we've talked a little bit around some of the reasons that I don't feel it's the most effective model. And it's basically just because, you know, you can't continue learning in a really intentional way if it's only happening once a month. And that's why many districts who started with that model have since moved to a weekly or bi-weekly early release, just because it seems to be more effective when you're practicing something, you want to practice it more often, and you don't want to worry about teachers losing that in between if there's a month in between. So it is on there as an option, but that I just wanted to clarify part of the reason why it wasn't an original recommendation.
Mhm. There were some questions around busing as well, so we made sure to include that. Also K4, different options for that early release, those are brought up as well, so it's very clear on the document. Another thing brought up was childcare opportunities, and we just wanted to make sure that and be very clear that these are on-site opportunities. Students would not leave Parkway. It would be on-site and offered to students right after school. So there would not be any transportation needs at all. We are looking into possibly having a paraprofessional or a different support for any students that may have any needs beyond what Milestones, Nicolay Rec, or Wisconsin Athletic Club could offer. So there is a link on the document to kind of dig into that a little bit as well. These were previously shared at the board meeting as well. A little bit about, you know, what other districts do, the different types of early releases that they do, how they provide time for staff to engage in professional development. Just kind of talking a little bit, I kind of talked about this already, is just, you know, having it chunked is just so helpful, and to make those really quick shifts and changes, and then also to kind of look and see if what we're doing is working, because then we want to keep doing it. And if what we're doing is not working for students, then we want to make a change quickly. We don't want to wait 4 weeks to do that kind of work. And then finally, the last section kind of just addresses some of the things that we would want to engage in during that time. Just really, again, focusing on those instructional practices, our learning targets. What standards are we engaging in? What do students need to know? Vertical teaming. So we have, in our middle school, we have one person in each content area. So it's really important to have time for them to work in vertical teams and have some opportunities to talk about the curriculum content and where students are at and how to move them and kind of collaborate with each other. It's also helpful K-8 for those vertical teams to meet as well in content teams, not just in grade level teams. And when you're thinking, you know, SEL, special education, I mean, all the different teams can be meeting during some of these times. And then also looking at EMLSS and really thinking about that framework and really guiding some of our decisions around data and having some time to kind of work through this process. And again, this is all going back to some of that, you know, just it talks about a little later is that personalization, making sure that we're doing and providing what each child needs. So when we're thinking about students with IEPs or students who might be GT or may have some behavioral type needs, this gives us an opportunity and some time to really address some of that and make sure that we're providing opportunities for those students in core instruction or the universal curriculum in an inclusive way. And then also, again, that personalization that talks, you know, speaks to that, you know, social emotional learning, gives us opportunities to work on some of those things along with some academic goals as well. And then just collaboration in general. We've talked in the past about currently we don't have a lot of opportunities for our special education staff to join their grade level teams or even content teams to do some planning. And when I say planning, really making sure that we're being intentional about how we're providing access to all students. So this is really getting at that equity piece. We want, you know, our education to be equitable among all of our students, that we're teaching high standards to all of our students in a rigorous curriculum and making sure that they have access to that. This also gives opportunities again for the SST team to join in as well. and our paraprofessionals. So there's been a lot of themes also around paraprofessionals being a part of this process. And I mean, they're a huge resource for us, and we count on them, and we need them as, you know, as they're part of our culture, and really engaging them in the work is really important. And then, of course, our decisions are based on data, right? So we need time to review and analyze the data in order to make some informed decisions, whether it be behavior data, academic data, social emotional learning, all of those pieces, really kind of focusing on that whole child. And that's what we want to support and make sure that we have a really strong trajectory for all of our students in the district. So that's kind of the gist of the document.
Ben, you got anything for them?
I can start if you'd like.
Yeah.
So you said people were asking for additional learning, but in what context were they asking for additional learning, and who was asking for additional learning?
So we've had a lot of our new staff members. We've had our special education teachers. We've had our content teachers. We've had elementary teachers wanting to do some additional learning as well around, you know, specific areas. They've, you know, talked to coaches. They've reached out to me. Our K-4 team even wants to do some additional learning in different pockets that really relate to their job and their role. So there's a lot, and it also came out through the interviews as well. When Holly interviewed for the strategic planning. So there were some solid themes of the need for additional professional development and learning.
And you'll see more of that on Wednesday night, Ben, the piece from strategic planning, because there were several different themes, areas that came out, and under every single area, staff asked for time for learning. Behavior supports, like wanting to know how to manage behaviors in their classroom, wanting to know how, like, just all over the place. Special ed was a big one.
Yeah.
Having time for paraprofessionals because their hours are so truncated that there's no time for them to learn. So it's just a theme, but that'll come, you'll see more of that Wednesday in her
Are we
report
gonna get,
too.
sorry, just slightly off topic. Will we get that report prior to or soon?
The presentation will be in the board packet, which I believe Karen is going to be posting either this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
The presentation is the report,
It's
or
all the information from the report. She put it into a presentation format for the board.
okay.
Okay, and
That's
so
a good question, Ben.
what?
I said that was a good question.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, so I guess, okay, so I'm going to find out what it is exactly they want to learn about on Wednesday. So you said behavior, and
I think you'll see the themes of the theme that staff want more time for professional learning, and you'll see it in lots of different areas from the strategic planning interviews. But I think as educators, I mean, we constantly know that we have to learn and grow and redefine our craft and adjust our craft to like the changing needs of kids. Like that's never going to stop as people in education. I mean, just professional growth and learning is just part of, you know what I mean, how we do business.
yeah. Well, I mean, because from and that's fine, but it also sounded like teachers wanted more prep time. And
so that
that's
kind of translates, yeah, and that kind of translates a little bit. So if the only time they have to get together with their teams right now and dig into that data and do that learning is during their prep time during the day, then they're essentially losing their prep time. So if we have built-in time in our calendar for that learning, they get their prep time during the day back.
So Allison,
kind of like
are you saying they're doing that already, that they're meeting with their teams over prep time?
that's the only time. Yeah, that's the only time they have. They can't meet with paras or special ed teachers because usually the time's not the same, but they can meet with grade level teams over their prep time.
And then
then they don't have prep time.
Well, and I also heard that a lot of staff, or at least in Parkway, we've lost prep time with the earlier start, that the morning used to be prep time for teachers. Have you heard that feedback?
I've heard more about the subs and like losing prep time with the subs this year, because they have like about an hour after school.
Well,
So
but
that's-
some of them prefer the morning because it's the
Sure,
beginning of the day. It's
Sure,
okay.
sure.
I've heard that feedback.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you had heard
sure.
that
It'd
feedback.
just be a shift. Yeah, if people preferred the morning versus the afternoon.
But
Sure.
in general, I feel like there's two issues and I'm hearing, I like when you had all the teachers, present and talk to us at the board meeting, I really heard a call for prep time and collaboration time, which some of this addresses. And then there's this separate call for professional development. And one of my concerns is that there's such a need for so much of it in so many different areas. And like in the beginning, you talk about supporting staff mental health, but then we don't see that as a bullet point necessarily being addressed in the learning, collaborating, and planning for with the 7 different bullet points of what you're wanting to cover in whatever form of early release,
I
whatever
would
form
say,
it takes.
yeah, and I would say as a teacher, we have an obligation to continue learning and to collaborate with our colleagues and to use
Absolutely.
data to plan instruction. And right now, they're struggling through trying to meet that obligation without like time. You know what I mean? That's just for that. So it's probably all over the place. You know what I mean? It's probably all over the place with, are they taking home their stuff to plan at night? Are they meeting with teams during the day? Like, there's just not that dedicated time for that piece.
Sure.
And so they're just making it happen because they're teachers. They're going to make it happen. You know what I mean? Some way.
Yeah,
outside
yeah.
of the day.
So just thinking about prep time, not necessarily professional development.
Sure.
Have you considered ways to build in prep time to the day without early release? Like I have no idea what that would look like. I don't know if other districts, how it's done, but have we looked into that sort of issue, just that issue?
They do have prep time built in the day.
But you're saying they're
Supposed
not
to be
getting
for
it.
planning and lesson planning and making copies and do you know what I mean? All those things that teachers have to do during that planning time. So they do have that time during the day.
Okay, so I guess, go ahead, Jenica.
So I do think with Parkway, there has been a little bit of a shift. So our end of the day, they did have prep at the beginning of the day, which was, everyone loved it. I loved it. Okay. So now it's shifted to the end of the day. We also have the pickup's pretty long. Okay. So then we really do lose some of that time because we do have an extremely long pickup. We have a lot of families that are doing car pickup. So then that extends how long you have to be at a duty. It is a rotated duty, so people are not necessarily doing it every single day. Where it gets tricky for elementary, so this is elementary, is that they have half-hour allied arts. So when you're taking 5-year-olds to an allied arts, it takes a long time to get them there. Then you have to pick them up and then you have to flip them to the next one. So, and then you have to go pick them back up. So when you're thinking about collaboration time or prep time, when you're working together with your team, or even your prep time in general in elementary, it's not very long versus a middle school or a high school where kids can walk themselves somewhere.
Yeah.
And, then you have like solid chunks of time to do some of that work. And that's just, every grade band has their, pros and cons, right? So for elementary, they don't have quite the amount of that collaboration time to work together as you would in a middle school or an elementary. The other thing too is scheduling some of that vertical planning as well makes it really tricky. So wanting to, shift to some of this supports that. The other piece too, with elementary, I'm forgetting what I was going to say with the elementary piece.
Well, no, I guess I'm just trying to clarify that you guys really see this as the only way to have prep and collaboration time and professional development, because I guess I'm just wondering if there is a way to build both into the schedule as is, if we were, I don't know, thinking outside the box or being creative more. I don't know if
And I would say what we want this time to be is dedicated for collaboration, using your data, sitting with your team and looking at your data and any new learning that has to happen. So that during the day, that can just be their prep time.
But how much time? So there's the 20-30 minute block for the younger grades. That's what you're saying they're using as their collaboration time, 20 minutes to meet with their teams?
I honestly don't think they have a lot of collaboration.
So have we talked to our staff about how they're currently using their prep time, or how they're feeling about the amount of, like, I mean, if we thought about surveying them about what their priorities would be for this time, or if we
And
don't
that-
know what you're
Yeah, I
doing?
would say that happened in the strategic planning interviews when every single person said, I don't have time to collaborate with my colleagues, use data, or learn new things.
But you're telling me we don't actually understand how they're using their prep time or their collaboration time exactly right now. And I'm sure it varies by grade level and teachers, but
So at the elementary school, Dr. Smith and Mr. Krager do a really nice job of kind of laying out some plans around that. So they do have like specific, they have a block schedule, right? So they do have collaboration time every single day. So they do have at least 1 hour of collaboration time. So within that time, keep in mind that you are dropping kids off, picking them up. So it's really not a true hour. It's an hour on the schedule, but it's not a true hour. So that time is blocked. So there are certain days that it's scheduled for principals coming in and meeting with them. They have set collaboration days. The team sets those days of when they are going to meet and collaborate.
okay.
And then they have prep time where they have the ability to, prep for their lessons, get things ready. So,
Okay.
so they have that scheduled and there is a system for that. But when we're looking at, like new standards coming out for ELA, new standards coming out for math, learning that needs to take place. It's really hard to get some of that collaboration time. What's going to end up happening is you're going to be taking one of their prep times to get some of that in on a consistent basis. And that's when we kind of lose that prep time. And so when they talk about planning, we're talking intentional planning. So that's something that we're talking about that could happen during this early release time. So a lot of teachers, yes, have been asking for planning time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's prep time.
Do you have have you kept track of the PD that's been taught this year so far? Like, I know we have the calendar of like the days where you work with others, but I imagine you maybe have used some prep time or whatnot. Like, I think you said there was about 19 hours this year, maybe, Allison, or something like that. Do we have?
Yeah, for the extended hours and the full days are about 19
Do you
hours.
have have we kept track of how that's been utilized? What's been taught or what's been discussed? Is that something you could share?
Yeah, some of it's been, a lot of it's been school specific. We've had a lot of staff members share that it's been too much. So then it's been dialed back during that common planning time.
I'm just asking if you could share, if I would just be curious as a follow-up to see what it's been, so I have some frame of reference for where you want to take it. And then if you could also share the Dr. Smith said the block scheduling, just so I could see that. Is that something you guys could share after this meeting?
Sure, and I would say that the curriculum review has taken up some of the time as well, because the ELA team has had to meet and the PE team has had to meet during those days to do some work. So then we've kind of blocked out other work for other teachers, but it definitely hasn't, because it's so spaced out and we haven't had a lot of days. It's not like a consistent, like we couldn't draft a consistent PD plan and say do you know what I mean? Like, which is what we're looking to do for next year.
Yep. Sorry, Ben, I hijacked your time.
No, it's fine. Wait, sorry, I might have missed it. What did they say was too much?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just taking some of those times to do some unit internalizations to kind of go through what are the standards that we're addressing, just doing what you would be doing in a PLC, right? So having some of those conversations, having coaches go in and kind of work through some of the shifts and changes within the standards, and then also some of the new work around phonics and some of the things that have come out. It's just kind of been a lot for staff members.
So what did you guys do instead?
We did a volunteer. So if staff wanted to come in, they could come in and have conversations and get some coaching around that. And that's how they've been managing it, like individual coaching when it works best for the teacher.
Okay, wait, sorry. So this is on professional development days, or?
No, not on professional development days, during their common planning time.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's common planning time.
We could pull the agendas, Danielle. That wouldn't be hard at all.
Yeah,
For
I
the
just,
few days that we've had. Yeah.
yep, I'd be curious to see.
So just,
Go ahead.
yeah, sorry. Well, one thing I'm hearing, and like, okay, so you can look at data, but I don't know, like I actually just read this article. Not an article, it was I don't know, I forget, it was in a journal or something. And I don't think the data has actually been released yet. But I guess these people from Harvard did research on, is data analysis in schools effective? And they found that it's not. And the reason why is because data analysis doesn't necessarily change instruction, and changing instruction is what causes there to actually be change in student outcomes. And that's actually supported by Dylan Williams' work in his formative assessment book. So anyway, I read that. So I guess my question is, if you're using this time to look at data, like how is that going to change student outcomes versus just giving teachers, like, I don't know, like committing to 40% of the time or 50% of the time to prep time, because it sounds like they're asking for prep time. So like you could do a thing for 50% of the time, and then you could give them 50% of the time for prep time, and then they could actually make the changes in their lessons.
So I think I'm wondering if we're saying some of the same thing, because when we're talking about time for collaboration and teacher learning, we're saying that we're coaching teams on how to create formative assessments, how to get together as a team, look at their formative assessments, see how kids are doing in different areas, and then plan their next lessons together so that they are changing their instruction based on how kids are doing. But the professional development part of that is just coaching teachers on how to do that and how to be a true PLC. So it's not like we would be sitting there like putting them in an auditorium. Do you know what I mean? And doing like professional development. It would be getting them to a space where their planning time is really high leverage, because they're getting together and they're planning based on what students need and as a consistent team, and then coming back again the next week and seeing how kids did, adjusting their planning. So I agree with you. Classroom teacher instruction is the #1 indicator of student success. Absolutely. So that's what all we mean by professional development is, like,
Well,
coaching
no,
teachers
there's
on
so
how to
many
do
things
that
in
work.
here. There's so many things listed as professional development. None of them are just, I guess I understand, my basic knowledge is teacher prep time would be like the thing you do daily to prep for your daily lesson, like that teachers need daily prep time. I think if they had, if I don't know, I would assume if you could ask them, then that you would want daily prep time. I think they're two different things that you're talking about, because you're talking about training teachers and giving them tools to collaborate and work together to provide better instruction, I think is what you're saying, but with these different tools and working together. It's not like an individual teacher getting their lesson plan for the day or doing what needs to be done to prepare for the day. They're different.
I agree with you. And I would argue that teachers doing things in isolation is not the most effective way to impact, right? You want them to be able
And
to
I can agree with that,
and-
but that's why I keep seeing this as like two issues. There's the professional development and the sort of laundry list of the data and the PLCs and the collaboration and the training, not to mention the block scheduling. That's another piece that I know Ms. Young wants to incorporate into the early release time, which sounds like might be a big undertaking as well. So a lot of things under professional development. And then I see the prep time as a separate thing, that sort of specific prep time and isolation. But I would agree, I'm sure that both are extremely valuable. I don't dispute that.
I agree with you. And I think the time they have as a team, though, would probably lessen some of the strain they're feeling daily doing those, do you know what I mean, lessons. If they're getting together as a team and they've got a plan for the week, that should hopefully alleviate some of the stress they're feeling daily during that prep time.
I guess I'll just tell you, I have sort of three big umbrella, you don't necessarily need my vote to make this happen. And I support so many of the principles and things behind it. But for me, the question is, I have to weigh the impact it's going to have on student outcomes, the impact on students and their families, and weigh the benefits to the district of, against that, right? And for me, I feel like I would better be able to do that if I knew a couple of things. Just a small one would be the budget implications of some of the supports we'd be offering, or are there any other budget implications from doing this generally that we should know about? The other piece is just the PD plan and having some accountability. Like, who do you envision doing the trainings? And there, again, there's just so much that you guys want to do. How do we know? And I understand that need, but how do we know that it's going to be effective if there's so much? How do we know what you're really going to focus on and weigh that against what we're, against some of the other pieces, the impact? And so how do we know it's going to align with strategic planning? We don't even have that piece yet. For me, the timing is off. And I feel like I would want to know, now I would want to understand that PD plan more, because there's so much in there. Again, it talks about supporting staff mental health, and I don't see that as a bullet point under the learning, collaborating, and planning for. And it's a bunch of the professional development stuff. So I want to understand, how does this support staff mental health other than a break from teaching, which obviously probably is, but they're still doing work, possibly, if you're asking them to learn new things and apply new techniques. So those are some of I think those are my things. And then the last, those are really kind of the pieces I need to understand to say, to move forward for me. And I'm just going to put that out there, because I don't like, we can get, those are the details I need.
Mhm. So I can tell you right away, there aren't there's no budget implications outside of maybe a small addition for families if we help with a sliding scale or free and reduced, if they take advantage of after school. Like, that'd be really the only budget implication. As far as like, how do we know that this is effective? I would say we know that what we're doing now isn't as effective as it could be. And so continuing to do the same thing and not change anything is kind of like that definition of insanity, right? Like, you just keep doing the same thing. And we know our kids are coming with more gaps and with more trauma, and with more mental health needs than ever before. And none of us were trained as educators to deal with what we're doing right now. So I think the mental health piece for staff is knowing there's going to be time, even if it's just for them to get together with their team and talk about what they're seeing in their classroom and student behaviors, and come up with plans together, because they don't have that time right now to have those conversations.
Well, shouldn't somebody as a district, shouldn't we have a cohesive plan to teach and lead them on? They shouldn't.
Absolutely, but we don't have time to do that. We can create a plan, and if we don't have time to implement it, then it's not going to be an effective plan. So the timing piece, so we could say, wait for the strategic plan. So then we get the strategic plan in May, we draft a beautiful professional development plan, and we have a calendar where we can't support any of it. So that's the piece.
Why is that?
Because if we are saying we have to wait for the strategic plan in order to give this time in the calendar, by that time, it'll be too late. Like, we'll have the strategic plan in May. Let's say we have a professional development plan in June. We're not going to, you know what I mean? Like, now we have next year's calendar, it's set. We have no time to implement that plan. So sometimes you have to have like a transactional change before you can have a transformative change. And I feel like this is a transactional change. And that's why we came to the board originally, to ask for that time. Because once we know that that time is precious and guarded and it's allocated for staff in that way, then we can build a robust professional development plan that, of course, would not include everything on that list. That's like,
Don't you
pie
have
in the
some
sky.
idea? I mean, you guys seem to know more about strategic planning than the board does, though. And I know you feel, we've talked about this, you feel like you kind of have some understanding of what these pillars are going to be. There are a bunch of things you've talked about wanting to implement. Is it impossible to start planning now, prioritize those with what you know in your head to sort of coordinate with?
No, I would say the priorities are going to be academic learning loss, so literacy and math, and social emotional whole child, so mental health supports. Those are going to be the big pillars, right? Like, we know that that's what our kids need, especially coming out of COVID. That's what we need. So that means teachers being able to create formative assessments, use data and adjust instruction so they have effective instruction in their classrooms. It doesn't, the story doesn't change. That's what we always need as a school district. It's having the time to actually support teachers to do the work.
So if this, I guess it's like I'm hearing two things. If the story doesn't change and you know what you would do, then I'm not sure I see an issue with timing of giving us a preview of how you want to use this time. But again, I'm telling, this is just me. This is what I need to feel okay with this. I'm just one person. So, that's.
No, I hear you. I trust our teachers and our administrative team to create that plan that's going to get super specific.
But I want to understand.
Identify
I want to understand it. And I need you as the leader and our experts in sort of doing this to help me understand it, and also to help our community understand it, because right now it's like you're saying we're going to do so much. It doesn't seem possible to accomplish all of that in this small amount of time. And if it's ineffective use of time.
So what would the harm be if we say we want to do these 10 things, we're allocating this time, and instead we do 2 of them really well?
Well, I'm asking, who do you envision doing this training? Is it outside training? Is it inside training? Are there budget implications for upping our? But are there budget implications for that? Like I want to know that.
Coaches. There's training for coaches, and there's training for administrators on professional learning communities. And then we work with them. We work with staff.
So you guys will be leading the trainings on these things. These are details I'd like to know. That's all.
But we didn't put a lot of time into details. We didn't sign anybody up for training when we don't currently have the time in this calendar to do it.
So people are not trained. So if this gets approved, you then have to decide whose people are going to take trainings between now and next year to get certified to do this.
Yeah, there's summer training opportunities that we've just kind of held off on signing up for because we don't currently know if that's going to be possible.
Well, wouldn't it be good to have that knowledge anyway? I mean,
if the coaches have it. Right, it would, but you talk about the budgetary impacts, so we're not going to spend thousands of dollars to train coaches if they're not going to have that time built into the calendar to effectively transfer that knowledge to all staff.
I guess so if early release is not approved, does that mean professional development is going to be either non-existent or not great in our district next year?
We'll keep doing what we can do. I mean, we're not going to stop trying, but it's going to be just trying to hodgepodge it in like we're doing now. We're not going to, teachers won't stop learning. They'll probably just continue to try to do that in isolation on their own time when they can with colleagues. I mean, teachers don't stop learning just because the calendar isn't there. That's just not how teachers are built. They're always going to learn.
Right. And I think there's a difference, like, I don't know if we truly have clarity around professional development and then what is professional learning time. So when we're thinking about professional development, that might be, I'm kind of getting hints of what I'm thinking you're saying. So correct me if I'm wrong. So when you're saying professional development, you're thinking people coming in, they're learning something new, right? That they're going to end up going to try. Is that your thinking?
Well, I'm thinking professional development means learning a new skill, whoever's doing the teaching, and then teachers applying that skill with others and then incorporating it into their practice.
Okay. So yes, so we're talking kind of the same thing. And then professional learning is I'm seeing professional learning, what I call like a professional learning community, free, whatever you want to call it, is that time that a team gets together, they're collaborative, they're looking at, here's our student work, this is kind of where, this group of students may need this one, what did you do in your classroom, how did you move those students, what are you planning for, how can we support each other, let's all try this, we're going to do this with this group,
we're on the same page. The collaboration is
forward. Okay. So when we're looking at professional development, it's tricky to try to, we've tried subs in the past. There's no subs right now, right? We've had more full days in our calendar. We don't have a lot of full days in our calendar. We had a lot more extended hours in the past. We used to have 2 a month. We currently have less than that now. So And again, that's a stretch for teachers, because then what we're hearing, right, that's outside of the school day, and that's tough for them. And I'm sure, I don't know if Ben, if you were here for extended hours, that's a long day for staff. And then you're asking them to learn new skills and doing PD time at that time. So that's been really hard, having it here till 5:30 at night, doing some of that.
I mean, I hear that, and that does suck, and I don't want to ask our teachers to do more. As an attorney, though, professional learning is something you do on your own time, and it's required. So I mean, I'm not advocating that, but
I'm sharing feedback.
yeah.
Yep. And then also, like during the summer too, it's non-contracted time, right? So do we offer and try? Absolutely.
What about offering stipends for teachers doing this work on their own time?
There is
offering to compensate them for the extra time.
It absolutely has been offered. But
Stipend?
Pay for each day. Yes.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah. So, but also, we're coming off of a, well, hopefully coming off of a pandemic. It's been COVID. And we also are thinking about the mental health of our staff too, right? So giving them some of that time. And
I told you, I'll give a mental health day in a second. I mean, I see the benefit to giving our staff that for sure.
I don't think, I think with how people have been feeling though, I think it's tricky to get a large group of people. Like you really can't train a whole district, like you because it's all pick and choosy of who's getting that training, right? So offering it within the school day, then you can offer that, again, it's access, right? Making sure that everyone has access to the learning. So we do that for our students. We want to do that for our staff as well.
It used to happen that you'd pull grade levels out and subs would come in and you'd kind of rotate the learning.
Yeah.
And there's no way to do that without subs. There's no way to I don't know. And I feel like I've given you sort of the biggest points, and I don't need to, again, I do agree with all of the things. It's just those details are what I need to understand. I know we also have some participants, so I don't know if we want to do any visitor participation on this, and then if I don't have any more, maybe Ben does, but I'm happy to kind of keep moving. I think I feel like I think you're clear on what I'm looking for, I hope.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you say you would like to see a PD plan.
Well, it's sort of about accountability. It's about understanding so that we can see how that time's going to be utilized. I think that's important to have a good understanding. And then, I guess if there are,
we were to map out a tentative PD plan, is there one of the options you want us to look at as we're mapping that out? Like, because it will look very different if it's once a month versus if it's, do you know what I'm saying?
You don't like the once a month option, so I guess I wouldn't.
So just kind of map it out if we had 2 or more days a month to meet with staff.
I think so. I mean, now that
I
you're
just wanted to ask
what's different, and I'd like to understand what that would be.
Okay.
I guess where I'm stuck is the prep time. So for example, so your collaboration can be pretty powerful. So for example, one of my first years teaching high school, I talked to this guy and I was like, hey, Ben, you should try doing whiteboard work after your lesson. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. So I went back to my classroom and individually I worked on getting problems for my whiteboard work. And I use it to this day because after the lesson, I also use side-by-side problems, but after the lesson, I can have the kids hold up the boards and then I kind of get a general idea of understanding on the concept I taught. But I didn't need to talk to this guy for 45 minutes about it. I just needed to talk to him about it for maybe 10 minutes. And so I don't know, it sounds to me like the teachers are asking for prep time. So is there any way we can designate some of this time for prep time and use it as you see fit?
I
Yes,
guess we would
I
be
could-
addressing that in a PD plan that would be creating. Because we'd kind of map that all out, right?
But it doesn't sound like that's what you guys wanted. I'm not hearing you say that's
I
what you
think
want to use it
I-
for.
I think it translates to prep time by
But
taking
what
all
Ben's
the-
asking for is very specific. It's a
right. So I
teacher-
don't,
teacher free time.
and I guess what I, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but if we are asking families to take this impact, I want to make sure that they know that it's going to be time that's really high leverage. And I believe that will then transfer to, they've got their prep time during the day a lot more. So I think they do get prep time, but they're going to be planning together, but I
Okay,
guess
so
I'm
if,
uncomfortable saying we're going to allocate a certain percentage of this as just take the time and do as you will.
if we're going to do
I'm
this,
telling families that.
if we're going to do this fully as PD time, administrators choose what teachers are doing.
But that's
Can I-
not what I'm saying either, but
Well, can
So
we
some
can we-
PLC
can we
collaboration.
eliminate meetings during their prep time then?
I think that would be a huge part of what we're trying to do.
Can we eliminate, because you said
I
sometimes.
don't know. I have to talk to principals. I can't just say they're never going to have another planning meeting. I mean, we have
Well-
IEPs, stuff that happens during planning times, like IEP meetings or things that pop up where you have to meet with your principal.
But that's very disruptive to lesson planning.
But I want to know, Ben, even though I'm uncomfortable saying we're going to do a certain percentage, there is no way I'm anticipating that principals or coaches are going to be standing in front of groups of teachers every other week. That's not the plan. There's more on the front end, right? Like if we're talking about how to be a PLC, there might be more on the front end. And then maybe there is a release and they're just meeting as teams and they're like doing meeting notes and that's how they're accountable. And they're, like things like that. It's not like a person. An administrator's not going to be at all those meetings. It would be impossible.
So my only concern is making sure time is designated for teacher prep time. And
Does it matter if it's during the day or during the 2 early
If you-
releases?
if there is some sort of commitment to, no
hear you.
meetings during the day, then that's fantastic. If you're planning on utilizing then, however long it is, for specific PD.
I
But
hear
the
you. I
problem-
don't think we could say no meetings. If you're adding in 3 hours or 6 hours a month, I don't think that could take away an hour every day, Monday through Friday and say no. Like that would just be
not?
impossible with, IEPs and other things that come up that you just have team meetings and stuff. But I hear what you're saying. So we
Nobody
can map
wants-
that out a little bit for you because I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I would agree, Ben, and it does open up some time, like currently during that collaboration time, we have to run like all the CST meetings during that time. You're running all of those types of things, who's
Yeah.
collaborative team meetings, kind of going through that whole RTI process of who needs intervention and all of that. So all of that kind of has to run through those times because we don't have time to do it in a
Well,
collaborative fashion.
that
So
could
that
happen
would be
in the-
supportive. Oh,
So
I'm
that
sorry.
that could happen during the early
Yeah.
release PD time.
Yeah, it's on there for the the equitable multi-systems of support.
All I want, and again, it doesn't necessarily matter what I want, because again, like Danielle, I'm only one vote, but I want designated time for teacher prep.
But Ben, do you see, so we can map some of that out, but do you see that if they have this time to meet as a team and do some data work and some planning and some collaboration, that it will give them more prep time that's just theirs?
Well, it depends. So it depends on how they're using their current prep time, which we don't know. So I wonder if a staff survey or understanding how they're using their prep time or what their priorities are because we have the themes, which is not quite exact in sort of what they're looking for, but it would help to share the schedules, what the current schedule, when are the schedules you mentioned for at both schools, like when are they supposed to have prep time to understand? And then the mystery may be that we don't get an answer to is how is it being used right now? Because it seems like
I mean, we can
very-
ask. It's
I
probably all
can get
different.
that info.
Yeah, it's probably very different. Because some people take stuff home, some people do, yeah, but we could ask some questions.
Okay, I don't have anything else. I don't see any hands up, Ben, but
Oh yeah, we should open it up.
I'm
'Cause
sorry. And I'll do prep versus when they're collaborating, so you kind of know the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously am not, I'm not in the day-to-day. I don't know how the schedules look. So that's good data for me to understand what we're doing now versus what you want it to look like, especially on those early release days.
And I can speak to just coming from a district that had early release, and my experience is that it did open up more, and we didn't have it, and then we got it. And it did open up more prep time for me during the day. And we ended up doing a lot of shift student learning during that early release time.
What was the scheduled early release in your previous district?
You're asking me to remember like 7 years ago.
Well,
I think it was like we had an hour and 45 minutes. I think it was every week.
every week.
Mhm.
Cool. Are they still, do you know if they still do that?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, there are 2 hands up, Ben.
Okay, so I think Justin's hand was up first, so if you could state your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Justin Rodriguez, and I live at 5742 North Sunset Lane in Glendale, Wisconsin. I have 2 children in the Glendale-River Hills School District, one at Glen Hills and one at Parkway. And I just wanted to say that I'm concerned about additional learning loss that may result from reducing the amount of in-person instruction time for our kids. That's one concern I have about doing the early release days. I also have a concern about additional costs that may result from either transportation or additional things that may be provided so that children have a place to go as a result of an early release day that happens instead of the normal release time. I think that if we do an early release schedule or provide some additional time for PD, that it should be a balanced approach between early release and extended days. So, one day a month is the early release, another day a month is the extended time for teachers to balance the additional time burden equally between staff and parents and families. I appreciate the time that the board members are providing, and yeah, thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you. Okay, so I think Carla is next, so if you could state your name.
Ben,
Yeah,
sorry, this is Lindsay. Am I
Oh.
able to just respond really quick to something?
I think so.
Sure.
I know the question has come up about the financial impact, and I just wanted to touch on the transportation would not be increased at all because it would just be the normal pickup time. We would just be adjusting the time. So there's no additional cost, and Right Way is able to adjust the time to pick up with, like I said, no additional cost. And then the other piece with the after school care, with Wisconsin Athletic Club, it would just be a $75 cost for the district, and we would absorb all of that. And then as far as
75
milestones,
per student or 75
75 for the time,
for the
for the
time?
whole time. Yep, for the whole time.
Every
Because we already
time they do it.
Yep. So we already have the partnership with them, and it's a program that they want to become involved with, and so they're willing to work with us. And then milestones, it would depend on how many families. So I think once we know if we have a plan, if we know the amount of families that would be interested. Like right now, there's about 35 students that participate in milestones. So I don't know if that would drastically increase or decrease with the amount of families that would need it. So and they weren't able to commit to a cost because they aren't sure what their cost will be. But again, depending on how many students, and then we'd be able to support families that would need it.
What about PD trainings? Because Allison just mentioned thousands of dollars for PD trainings.
So I think she's speaking to, there's a couple different trainings that she talked about for professional development over the summer. And I think it was estimated between like 10 and like 15, depending on how many staff members we had attend the training. And there's a lot of grant money and ESSER funding. And so that's why we're trying, when we have the strategic plan and all of the other ideas of what we're going forward with, that will also help us determine how we're utilizing those ESSER funds as well. Because that's supposed to be used for learning loss and professional development for staff. So if it's something that we can move forward with, then we can find the money and we'll make it work. But I also, as I said to Allison, I just want to make sure that whatever we're investing in, we're going to be able to use.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay.
Yep.
Carla, you're up.
I apologize for the background. I don't know how that happened, and I don't know how to fix it. So I am in outer space today. Carla Pennington Cross, 909 West Acacia Road. I really appreciate this open conversation and discussion. I appreciate the question you guys are asking. So I feel like I'm kind of lost in the weeds here, but I wanted to share a few thoughts as a parent. So you guys just cut me off if I'm just talking for too long. Hopefully not. I will say I have significant concerns about the cost of families of early release days right now. I think that's one of the reasons that families were so burned out by early release days. And I know we have a whole new leadership, and I worry that you don't see what's coming with early release days, because there was no end to the complaining, because there was no end to the trouble to families. 40% of families are economically disadvantaged this year. It was up from 30, right, in the face of the pandemic. You may not see a rise in people using after school care because their kids are going to be going home to empty houses. It's a significant potential impact on kids. So, when I hear about early release, I think, oh God, what's going to happen to these kids? And I wonder if you've considered alternatives like early release for teachers, like keeping the kids there for enrichment and learning blocks. To me, that's an ideal solution. The day is the same every single day for the kids, but you have, I don't know what you would call it, field days, PE days, career days, whatever you could do with that time that's not in classrooms. And, it would mean that some of your teacher wouldn't be released, but most of them would. And it would allow you to have some flexibility, I think. I've read whatever I can find. I know some schools are doing this. I hope you'll think about it. Think about something other than, a way to use that time more creatively and keeps kids in school. I'm seeing you make a face, Allison, so I don't know what that's telling me. Maybe you guys have already considered it. I'm happy to hear about it. For buy-in, I will say this from families, because I think you're going to see a lot of resistance. Allison, when you said, what would be the harm of not doing 10 things, only doing 2? I think the harm is with the trust that the community has in the school to do the PD that you're planning, right? I think even if it were to identify mission goals, it would make a big difference for families to buy into this, right? So, imagine a world where you say, our mission this year with PD is to study educational equity because we have this massive achievement gap. And our mission in PD time is going to be built around that. And with the early release day, we're going to have, 30 hours of PD time devoted to educational equity. And that's going to roll into the classrooms. If a message like that goes out to families, I know I would have more buy-in and feel better about it. So I really appreciate Danielle asking about, what the plan would be, because I worry about that. I just worry about that. So I wanted to share that. The last thing I wanted to ask is, Ben, the research you mentioned, is it possible for you to share a link? I'm really curious about that. I would love to read about it.
Yeah, no, I can share, but it's like, I was looking for the actual article or the research, and I couldn't find it. So it's more like it was these Harvard researchers talking about a study they did with 23 different schools, and they said any positive impact was marginal, and that was basically because, again, it doesn't necessarily change instruction. Now, it can be useful in the sense that, like, for example, if people see on the ACT, like, oh my God, like, no one's getting the matrices question right. And then they look through the curriculum and they're like, oh, it's because we don't teach matrices. Okay, well, that's an easy fix, right? You determine, okay, which class should we put it in, algebra 2 or pre-calc? But yeah, if it doesn't change instruction, it's going to have zero impact. And that's what Dylan William talks about too, informative assessment. You have to change instruction for it to have an impact. Anyway, that's a long way of saying, yes, I can, but I couldn't find the actual academic article.
Okay.
And
Do you know who the authors were? You don't even have that?
I do.
Maybe I can hunt for it because I'm
Well,
really
I can
curious
email-
about that.
I can email it to you, but it was.
That would be great.
Heather something.
Okay. Yeah, if you could email it to me, I would love to look at that. The
Heather
other
Hill.
last thing I wanted to mention. Go ahead.
It
Sorry.
was Heather Hill, and she's a professor at Harvard Graduate School of Education. It was at a February presentation. That's what it was. It was a presentation. So she must have something written down, but maybe she just hasn't published it yet.
The other thing that I'm worried about is this idea that relieving teachers of time stress and giving them prep time constitutes mental health support. I understand that it can relieve some pressure, but mental health support is something really different for teachers. And if you're looking at PD time as constituting part of this mission of building mental health supports for teachers, I hope you'll look at actual, PD around mental health, whether it's resilience work or renewal work or something other than other things, right? Something that's actually focused on mental health and burnout for teachers, for instance. Because I don't think, we all live it. We know getting relief, like getting a Saturday off from my kids feels great, but it's not really supporting my mental health. It's just letting off a little of the steam in my struggles. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I hope you will revisit that and rethink that idea that all this PD around other subjects constitutes mental health PD or an answer to that need for mental health support for teachers. It's going to take expert like SEL guidance, mental health guidance to and I know there's a lot of material online to that I think would really support teachers and help with a lot of that time management stuff. I'm sorry to talk for so long. I'm in outer space. What can I say? That's my thoughts. I just want to share that as a parent. I appreciate all the work you guys are doing around this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Is there anyone else?
I don't see hands.
All right. So that was a discussion. So we should move on to the curriculum review updates.
All right, let me see. Oh, I'm not muted. All right. Should I share my screen maybe? How about that?
Yeah, sure.
All right, hold on.
Let's see. Let me make sure that you can. All right, you should now have access.
Okay. Sorry, I got a lot going on here, so.
I feel like we all do.
Got like 500 screens. Can you see this okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, so this is kind of shared in the document. This is just kind of an overview. I'll kind of show where we're at right now, but this is kind of our workflow for, I'll start with PE. Who's all been on the team. So we're working with all the partner districts. So Mapledale, Indian Hill, Fox Point, Bayside. I've kind of talked about this before at board meetings and actually at this committee as well. So these are all the members that have been taking part in this work. So you can see the dates that we've been meeting. We started with really kind of digging in with a gap analysis. There were new standards that came out for PE. So we started with digging into those and looking at the new standards and looking at our curriculum and where are the gaps. So that was kind of the focus and what the current state of PE is in all of our districts and doing a share out and kind of looking at that information as a whole at our first meeting. Then we started doing some work around a vision for PE. We created a vision statement. Ooh, not look good. Let me just do this real quick. There we go. So this is what the team came up with. So we are going to revisit it at the end and see if we're still sitting here, but physical education contributes to the development of physical literacy, which is defined as an individual having the motivation, confidence, physical competence, knowledge, and understanding to value and take responsibility for purposeful engagement in physical activities for the development of the whole person throughout their lifespan. A lot of this was based off of some of work that was done. I forgot the name of it. It's gonna be beyond me. I'm not gonna pull it up, but there was some studies that we looked at and some other vision statements, and we kind of came up with this from there. So that was kind of our first meeting. Our second meeting that happened on February 3rd was really looking at, oh, wrong one, sorry. Let me go back to the right. Sorry, November 1st, January 6th, that's when we confirmed the vision, kind of walked through that again and started talking a little bit about outcomes. So we did some work around what are our outcomes. So that would be what standards are we going to be addressing? So what do students need to be able to do by the end of 2nd, 5th, 8th, and the end of high school? So we kind of did a vertical alignment on that, looking at what are going to be, some of you might know it by power standards or priority standards. Nicolay uses outcomes. So just looking at what students need to be able to do. So we're consistent across all the partner districts as all of our students go to the same high school. Not all of our students, but many of our students go to the same high school. And just kind of working through that. So we were able to come up with all of our priority standards for 2nd, 5th, 8th, and high school. Our third meeting was just recently, February 21st. We did some work around human growth and development, really reviewing what are we doing in our districts, what are our shared experiences, what are some areas that we need to grow in and make adjustments and changes to, and then what are some glows, what are some things that are going really well. We shared units and lessons and our scope and sequences with each other. The big look fors for this were, the videos are all old. So a lot of them are still the same videos that probably many of you had when you were younger. So that was consistent across districts, and really looking to find some updated resources. And then the other big trend that came out of that is really thinking about inclusive language and wanting more training around inclusive language and to help support making adjustments and really kind of going through the curriculum again with a different lens. Thinking about inclusive languages and what instructional practices are we utilizing that we may need to shift to make sure that we are being inclusive for all students. So I've been looking into some different opportunities for some trainings and different modules, and there's some really good things coming out of California, and even policy coming out of California that we may want to dig into a little bit just around that for our district. So that's kind of where we're sitting with that. And then
sorry, I'll let you finish. My questions are sort of specifically related to what you're talking about with HGD. So I'll let you finish and then we can come back to it.
Sure. And then our next meeting where we're going to focus in on some common assessments, just so we can kind of everyone's using the same rubrics and common assessments, and then also looking at UDL and kind of creating some different lessons and different things like a resource bank of making sure that we're providing access for all students, so to the standards. So if a student has different physical needs, or how do we get them to access those physical education standards by providing different supports for them so that everyone can take part in the physical education classes. And then there'll be, once we get this work done and cleaned up, then we'll do some work this summer. I'm guessing the summer is when we're going to be doing a lot of our work around some of that inclusive training. If we have to do any rewrites for the curriculum. And then there'll be a board presentation as well.
I have some questions. So I was curious, our specific Glendale curriculum, right? So has an advisory committee that was convened in 2016. Did you guys talk about, or is there any desire to, the statute's pretty vague. It just says you should have an advisory committee that shall consist of so many members, right? But it doesn't say how often or when that advisory committee has to meet. So how are you guys thinking about that part of the curriculum planning for human growth and development?
Well, there's new standards that are going to be coming out for human growth and development. Let me just, they're supposed to be coming out, I think, next year. I gotta look at the document. I don't have it linked. Do I? Oh, here. Let me look. Yeah, so new standards are coming out for human growth and development 22-23.
Okay.
So that's when we'd start doing looking at those new standards. And then at 23-24 school year is when we go through a full curriculum review with that whole advisory panel. Right now we're talking about doing some fine tuning and making some right now changes.
Okay.
Based on really what is best practice and what we need
Okay.
to, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so that would be the time though when you would.
And we get a whole team together, and there's some real specifics of who needs to be on that team. And we'd go through the entire process
Okay.
of what was done.
So have you guys talked about separation by gender? So you talk about inclusive language, but some of the curriculum, it's not just the language you use, it's what you're teaching, right? So the idea in our curriculum that you can only teach about male-female relationships, and that you can talk about homosexuality and you can talk about being transgender, but you cannot talk about whether it's right or wrong. I mean, to me, that goes against the idea of us being an inclusive district. If we're going to tell a child, I can't say if what you are is right or wrong, but you exist. Like, to me, that is just, I couldn't imagine being a teacher or having to teach this and having to, that to me is appalling. And that, I hope, is sort of that we take the idea of inclusive language beyond that and really, like, I understand that this is not a full refresh, but to me, that I hope that's part of the work that whether the other districts want to do it or not, that part I have a really hard time with. And I don't think that we can say we're for equity and inclusion when we cannot tell a child that it's okay that they are who they are.
Yep. And that's why I mentioned, like, there's some really good things coming out of California, some policy, there's some really good stuff that I've been going through, that because we're our own district and the board has the right to make some decisions. I think it would be very supportive of our district, with looking at some of the work that they're doing there. So I pulled a lot from theirs of some changes that we could, very easily make. But I don't know how that will, I'll have to talk to Allison and whatnot to figure out how that's going to affect policy.
That's what I was going to say. I could almost see, so some of the work that's being done with the equity committee, some of the work that's being done with policy, when we're drafting that equity policy, with the committee and with the consultants that are helping us walk through some of that, and they're helping us look at our policies through that equity lens. I think that's going to be some big heavy lifting, because then when we have that in place, then we kind of have the legs to stand on to make sure we're doing all this teaching and using this curriculum that's what you're looking for, Danielle, because
what kind of policy? We don't have policies. I mean, we have a non-discrimination. We don't have policies right now that prevent us from being an inclusive district.
No, but I think that we can't assume that all families would be happy with that route of instructions. We want to make sure we back it up and say, this is what we believe in, and this is part of our policy.
I got
around equity and inclusion, and just having that, like, stated is all I'm saying, because that way we can say, no, this is what we're about. Like, this is what we believe in. This is who we
Okay,
are.
I understand. Yep. I
That's
understand.
where I'm going to. Yeah,
Okay,
it would
got
just be nice that it's completely supported by the board. This is what we believe. This is who we are, and this is
Well,
how
so
we.
the
let's do
teachers
that,
are,
Ace. Let's
how
get
we
that
roll.
going, because I hate to think that another group of students is going to go through this curriculum and feel marginalized or feel like we don't value them as who they are. So that's the other thing, the question. I know this is probably controversial, and maybe there's data out there that talks about, separation of gender by sex, but we have kids who are non-conforming, non-binary. We have kids who don't feel comfortable being separated. And I just want us to think about how do we approach that in an inclusive way? Because right now I don't know what their options are. It's this or that, or
Right.
muddle through, feel uncomfortable.
and I think that equity policy is going to be really important, because then, like you said, Danielle, we don't have to wait till we go through this whole curriculum review process. If we have a policy drafted that says this is what we believe and this is how we're going to teach and this is how we're going to then teach, we can find other resources. Do you know what I mean, for teachers to use?
Yep.
You know,
Well,
what
I'm glad you
Make
found
sure-
some, Danica, because I was looking after I watched some of these videos. I mean, some of them are probably these 90s videos about HIV and are probably not even medically accurate or I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Right.
so thank you for doing that work. I think it's just so key to the kind of district we want to be and that we talk about being, is that this is, I don't know, if we're taking this on, if we're choosing to take this on and teach this to children, then we have to do it in a way that is equitable, that is inclusive. And it's not that way right now, it feels to me. So, okay.
I would agree.
I know. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, so we're gonna work on that, and I can, share, some of that stuff that I found too, and I felt really good about it. All right, so that's PE. Moving on to ELA. If I could just get one more tab open. Good. All right, so here's the ELA workflow as well. You can kind of see who's on the teams here. So again, this is on the board docs. Our first meeting, again, going through that gap analysis, new standards came out. So we did the gap analysis, looking at where we have some holes in our curriculum based off of the new standards. We did that for all areas. We also looked at, did comparisons of instructional minutes, time spent on ELA, and just really getting a current state of where everyone's at with ELA. And that happened at our first meeting. So there was a lot of work teachers had to do. So I'm very thankful for all the volunteers, both for PE and for ELA, on the time they spent doing some of this work. This is some heavy lifting for them, and the coaches really did a nice job of supporting them. So very thankful for all that they've done. So we kind of went through again, just that gap analysis. We started looking at the vision statement that came from DPI. And looking through that, and then started digging in just a little bit about instructional practices. So we kind of came up with a vision for ELA, then we moved on to the instructional practices. On February 3rd, we had a cancellation because of I think the power was out, if I remember correctly, the December one. So that was shifted to February 3rd. We spent the entire time really digging into, DPI did a really nice job of through the grade bands, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, really laying out based off of the vision, coming up with some really solid statements on how you can meet that vision. And then what we did was we looked at their anchor standards and then their instructional practices that they, based on research, are going to meet that vision. So we spent a lot of time looking at those instructional practices and engaging, is that something that we do in our district? Is that something that we're comfortable with doing in our district? We're successful with that? Or is that an area of growth for us? So we created a document looking at different areas of growth And that also leads to some of that PD, right? So when we're seeing some different trends in different areas of where teachers wanted to learn more about certain instructional practices or felt like they didn't know enough about them and would like to learn more, we have a document with all that information on it. And then also there were some really highlighted areas that they're doing really well, which gives our teacher leaders opportunities to also support others, right, within that. So we can kind of go across districts as well with some of that learning. Our next meeting was we had CISA come out and do a vertical and horizontal alignment, looking at, again, those priority standards, outcomes, power standards, whichever you're familiar with. So at each grade level, we came up with 10 priority standards. Right now, the standards are now in the hands of the literacy leadership team. So we have coaches and a professor and some leaders looking at these standards and really going through them with a fine-tooth comb, looking at a heat map from forward, looking at STAR data, using data to kind of like check and see if, oh, all these questions like you talked about earlier, Ben, here's all these questions that are being asked on forward and we're not hitting it in one of our priority standards. That's something we might want to think about. They're also looking at it really closely vertically to see if we have any like holes or gaps, like a standard may only be taught in one grade level and it's not taught in the next two. So we need to make sure that everything's building. So they're kind of taking that project on and then they're going to bring it back to the team and we'll be discussing it again before we, you know, it's in draft form right now before it's finalized. Our next meeting, we're going to be digging into, we have the literacy leadership team, again, of all those leaders from all the districts are going to be running different focus groups, really looking at vocabulary instruction, spelling instruction, and grammar instruction. They're going to be breaking out into different focus groups, looking at what is best practice, what is research saying around that, and then coming up with our next steps for our districts with that, and then coming up with some shared commitments. And then our final meeting is going to really be looking at an equity audit of the curriculum, and then UDL focuses, you know, how are we providing access for all learners, and then doing a crosswalk of standards, looking at, you know, college and career readiness standards, looking at some of the SEL standards, and are we meeting some of those within our curriculum and the work that we're doing. So that's kind of where we sit with ELA right now. And granted, some of this might shift. If this takes too long, then, you know, this is always updated. We may need another meeting. So that's that.
Danielle, do you have anything?
She kind of looks like she's frozen.
She
She
is.
looks frozen.
Yeah, she is.
Oh, yeah.
She's gonna come back in, I bet.
She's definitely frozen.
Yeah.
So does this mean you could adopt a new curriculum?
I don't think we'll probably adopt away from the readers and writers workshop, but we are definitely looking into the phonics piece to support the science of reading, vocabulary, and the grammar. So that's really where the holes are, where the gaps are, right?
And that's what I think a lot of districts have realized and moved to, is just getting that phonics piece more solid in place.
Sorry, I
No,
had technical difficulties. I don't know what happened.
we figured it out that you're frozen and then you're gone and now you're
You
back.
guys were all frozen for me. I was like, hello, and then boom. Sorry.
Were you able to hear though? Do you need
I
anything
think-
repeated?
No, except I think my internet. No, I don't think so. I had a few questions, but not. Did you wrap up your last piece?
Mhm.
Yeah, Ben, did you have any other questions? I'm sorry if I stopped you.
No, I mean, I'm glad to hear that, there's going to be phonics instruction. I never taught English. So, I mean, I just have somewhat of an understanding of how Readers and Writers Workshop works. I'm not necessarily a huge fan, because I do think that, I mean, there's not a lot of like repetition. There's not a lot of like, this is how you write a paragraph, this certain way, or this is how you write, do this sentence structure. You put the adverb in this spot and, the adjective here, and that's more persuasive or something like that. Again, I'm not an expert on that whatsoever. So
Is Readers and Writers the units of study? That's the curriculum we use, or is that different?
That's a piece of the curriculum we use. So we really have to, right now we're looking at gaps. So we found that we have gaps in vocabulary, spelling, and grammar.
yeah.
And
So
those are the
I'm
gaps.
glad
What you're talking to, Ben, is the grammar piece. So
So, yeah.
strengthening that up as well. Yeah.
So I'm glad that, you're gonna look into bringing in more phonics,
Mhm.
vocabulary, people have to memorize vocabulary to use it, stuff like that. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, and all of this is based off of the standards, right? So it really the standards are what drives everything.
Right.
So we need to make sure that we're meeting the standards and utilizing best practice to meet those standards. So, yeah. Right on, Ben.
I just have general questions, I think, to help. So we're working with the partner districts. Do they all use the same curriculum? Just what we use units of study and Readers and Writers Workshop as part of that, or what curriculum do we currently use?
Yes.
Okay, so
They're
it's
part of it.
two
They-
curriculums.
Depending on the school district, they use different pieces for phonics and spelling and grammar. So they all are using different things. So that's why we really want to dig in a little bit into this to see what really is best practice. Things have shifted and changed. I don't think it really hasn't changed that much, but we do have some gaps that we need to fill. So we're looking at these focus groups of the vocabulary, spelling, and grammar.
Are we considering changing curriculum based on these gaps that we have, or based on?
Well, we would do some altering and adding possibly some additional instructional resources to meet the gaps that we have.
So supplementing what we have now.
Right? Because the whole time, should not be spent in just Readers and Writers Workshop. That's just a piece of it, of your ELA time in an elementary school.
Okay.
Well, really in middle school as well. Really, I mean, there's really not, you shouldn't have to teach spelling in middle school. It should be vocabulary instruction. So, grammar, yes, you'll probably have to continue higher level grammar, but.
So were we seeing, so we are addressing our gaps and how we're not meeting the standards. Other districts are having, I imagine, different gaps or standards, and we're working with them to try to understand if their best practices, if we might incorporate some of that.
We may take some, it depends on what they share. We haven't had this meeting yet.
Okay.
So we're going to be learning about best practice. What is best practice? What is the research telling us? And then looking at what each district is doing currently, and how is it going? What effect is it having? And then we're going to be making some decisions around, do we need additional professional development around this? Do we need to adopt some additional resources? So those will be the discussions coming out of that. So it's going to be all together, but then we have to get into our separate districts as well to have some of those discussions too.
Okay.
Is
Is there more, last time it was discussed, and I've seen, Ed Reports has this review of units of study. It's from a few years back, but it does not speak highly of units of study. Is that why we supplement, or how do you feel about that report? Is there other data out there that says that Lucy Calkins or the units of study is effective and does meet standards? Yeah.
I mean, we can look at our internal data, and our honestly, our ELA scores have gone up since we adopted. So there's some really good internal data that has been happening for us. There are some things that need to change within the units of study. There are new units coming out in August and some in June. So
Okay.
based off of the science of reading, not necessarily that specific report, but based off the science of reading that happened, which is something a little different. Everyone's been making shifts that have not been addressing some of those things in their curriculum.
Science of reading is a newer like data or report.
It's a report that came out. Yeah, just focusing on the science of reading versus this has been going on forever, the whole language versus phonics. And there's got to be, you need both. You know, every child is a little different. And then how you get at them is going to be a little different too. I will say that phonics and spelling is so very important, and we need to be more robust in that area, and we need to help support and train our K2 teachers and support them in that.
When
they're asking for it.
Okay, when you add like the UDL and kind of when you're looking at it from the equity standpoint, I mean, I guess one of the things that was concerning about reading about units of study was like, it doesn't ask kids to do more complex work. It keeps them where they're at, so that it could actually impact equity where you have, you know, kids coming in at a lower level, but you're not challenging them with more complex, you know, material than what they can do. Does the way we look at equity or the UDL, and I know this is not my area of expertise clearly, so I'm just, you know, saying, do we look at that aspect of it? Like, is that kind of part of,
I think a little bit in that Anna Young, hold on. I do think in there might be a little they're kind of missing the shared reading piece in that, because when you do shared reading, that's at a grade level text. So students do have access to grade level text. So I don't know if when that report was done, if they really kind of looked at that. That's another piece that we utilize in our classrooms each and every day. And then we also do immersion units in our classrooms as well in K2 to build up vocabulary and support that. So they do have access to grade level texts every day, all students.
So, okay. I'd love to talk more.
And then there's also a read aloud where you're getting at, which is multiple grade levels above, right? Like, you know, in first grade, you might be doing, you know, Frog and Toad, which is at, you know,
higher,
beginning of third grade, end of second grade reading level. So you are getting access into that and talking about characters and having these deep conversations. So when you're just looking at, you know, those pieces, there's a lot of pieces. And a lot of things that need to happen. So it's not just that lesson for Readers Workshop and that lesson for Writers Workshop. There's a lot of components to it. Just like even any of these curriculums do have like all these different components, but kind of packaged in a different way.
Okay, cool. Thank you for bearing with my minimal knowledge in this area, but I'm curious. I told Allison I'm reading a couple different books, Cultivating Genius and Other People's Children, or actually that's called Multiplication is for White People. That's Lisa Dumpett's second book. I'd like to start a book club offline. We'll talk about this later, and just pick your brain more on these topics, because I'm interested.
Shifting the Balance is a good book.
Oh, okay. Add it to my list. I actually was thinking about maybe doing like a community-wide book club or something where we could read sort of like educational books or things about public education. Stay tuned with all my free time, but
I don't even know what to say.
Thank you. I appreciate those updates. And obviously I think you'll keep updating the board as you see fit.
So we'll probably do June. I'm guessing June, July will be big meeting.
Okay. Cool. Sweat it out together.
We need to keep digging into it. Yep. All right.
So are there any public comments?
Oh, I just closed it.
You know it. You got it up here.
I don't think so. So then we should open it up to visitor participation on any non-agenda item. Oh, wait, sorry, Asrita, do you want, so which one do you want? I'm sorry.
I think I wanted the non-agenda item, but I applauded instead of raising my hand, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Okay.
You'll take the applause though, Jenica, right?
Thank you, Estrida.
Estrida Cogers, so can I go ahead or was there anybody else? for
Oh, you're
that
good.
Comment, okay.
Nope.
Estrida Coger 7007 North Rayburn Lane.
Neighbor.
So I think the curriculum committee is the place to ask this question, but I can ask it somewhere else as well. So about a month ago, the state announced a Kids Ahead initiative to allocate money to school districts to support student and staff mental health. And our district was awarded $22,000. And Lindsay and Allison provided me a link with the possible ways to use this money. And some of those included training for staff on mental health related programs, which fits in with what the conversation was about PD. And so specifically providing youth mental health first aid training, compassion resilience training, or trauma sensitive schools. Some of these are more direct service options. Some of them are support for staff or support for families. So I was wondering when we can start hearing about how different needs in the district could be addressed with these funds.
So we're waiting on DPI because DPI will reach out to us with timeline information. So there's like reporting whenever we get grant money like that. There's a reporting timeline like, okay, so the grant money is now accessible and here's the application, here's what you have to fill out, here's all the criteria. I could ask Lindsay, but she hasn't shared with me if we've received that specific information yet. Honestly, when you asked us about it, it was like the day after it was announced and we didn't even know about it yet. Like there was no notification to schools at that point. So we went and Googled it and looked it up, and that's why we sent you the link, because we hadn't even heard or been notified as a district about that funding. So that was new to us. I think that was a couple weeks ago when you reached out. So I could check with Lindsay. I don't know if we've received any additional information on it. But typically we get like a mass email to all schools from DPI, letting us know what steps we need to follow to apply and let them know what we're going to spend it on.
And I understand that there's specifics that you need that specific information, but given that SEL and mental health needs came out as one of the top kind of priority areas when families responded about the ESSER funding, and I'm hearing that it was a strategic plan outcome priority as well. It seems like that it will need to be, I mean, there's a need to spend
Right.
it, to plan.
Right. I just don't know what we're going to spend where. So obviously we're going to spend part of the ESSER money on mental health and SEL because that was a huge part of that survey. And then it came out of strategic planning. So because it's such an overall district priority, like there could just be general funds that we're using to support SEL. So I just don't know like what's going to shake out. So what specifically this pot of money would go towards, because there's going to be a overall plan for SEL. And then we'll determine, okay, so this pot could pay for X amount, ESSER funds is going to pay for X amount. Maybe obviously we're going to allocate general building funds, district funds too, because it's one of the priorities. So when we look moving forward, it's academics and it's social emotional. Those are kind of the two big, obviously, areas. So this is nice because it's money that, you know what I mean? It's a little less that could potentially come out of the overall district budget, but those are priorities, like regardless of this grant, if you know what I mean, like those would be things we'd be spending money on anyways. So this is just a nice little support for that.
So what's the plan on hearing about how these priorities are going to get enacted so that we don't get to June when
right. So that, it's all part of the strategic plan. It's part of staffing. We have a staffing update tomorrow where we're going to start talking a little bit about what some of the priorities are around SEL. So that'll be at tomorrow night's board meeting, but it's the same process that we're using to talk about how we're supporting reading, or how we're supporting math, or how we're supporting, all the priorities of the district. And we've often said it's got to connect to that strategic plan and the pillars, that we determine are our priorities as a district. So it could be June.
So
I started in September, right? So I'm listening to staff, gathering information. We're doing surveys, we're doing strategic planning, and it's all culminating into what these priorities are going to be for the district.
I want to piggyback on Estrita's comment, but I don't want to cut her off. So
I'm good, thank you.
okay. So one thing I'd ask for that we've talked about before is what I'd like to understand is how our current resources are being allocated and how we're utilizing our student services team to provide SEL, mental health, emotional support. So if it would, since it sounds like, the proposals are coming down the line, for me, I like to understand the foundation, the present, what we have as a base. So I've asked you this, but I'd like to sort of just again ask that in either maybe April or May, we ask our SEL team to present and give us an overview of the social emotional supports, the mental health services that we're currently providing, services, et cetera, so that the board can have that foundational knowledge of like what it looks like right now in our school. I hope the timing may be off since we're talking about staffing this week, but still,
I do draft, so it's good.
Yeah, I'd love to have them present and give us that overview so we can say as a board, we have that knowledge.
Sure.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for asking that, Estrita. You got a couple more hands, Ben.
Yep. All right. So I think Melissa's next.
Hi, my name is Melissa Campbell. I have one daughter in K4 and one in early childhood. And my address is 6563 North River Road, Glendale, Wisconsin, 53217. I just had a couple of questions. One, thank you for the conversation around the curriculum review. That was most helpful to me around just selecting priority standards and how we're looking at units of study, which I think has tremendous gaps. But I think from the conversation, you're well aware of that. So that made me feel really good. But the question I had is I'm very new to the district, so I can't find who the student services director is. And I kind of wanted to ask a question about the joint federal accountability reports that came out around ESSER and IDEA. I know ESSER's been on hold for 3 years, but I'm wondering if Glendale-River Hills has been identified in any areas for IDEA, and if I know it's public record, if I can see copies of those reports, or if that's something that we talk about in a venue such as this, and who I would direct those questions to, because I can't on the website really see anyone that kind of would get that information, except maybe Dr. Peggy Rodriguez, who helped me with my daughter's IEP. So I just have lots of questions around the student services system in Glendale-River Hills and how it currently operates.
Sure.
Which we're not going to all ask now, but just that IDEA accountability report is what I'm curious about, if Glendale-River Hills has been identified.
So I don't know if you want to chime in, Jenica, because we were just going over, like, talking about that.
We were not identified
In any area?
in no areas.
And then as far as student services, when I started in the district, that position was eliminated. So because I have the license, I've been just kind of supervising and taking over in that role. Also working with Dr. Rodriguez a ton because she's got a lot of knowledge in the area. And so she's been really supportive. We are looking right now, we're actually in the beginnings of the interview process so that we have somebody allocated specifically for that role going into the next school year. But I would be I was director of pupil services in Racine Unified for 2 years. And I was also an inclusion coach. And so I have a lot of passion around special education services and that whole realm. So I'd be happy to talk to you if you want to shoot me an email with any questions or just to have a phone call or conversation. I would be more than happy to do that.
I appreciate that, because I didn't want to just email you. I thought that would be weird, but I really want to see these reports.
No,
Okay,
no, I'm
thank
here
you.
to just be emailed. I can be emailed anytime. No problem.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And then Carla.
From outer space again. Quick follow-up question on the discussion around the question that Estrida asked about the grant funds. So the way I'm understanding, so I had two questions. One, the way I'm understanding it is that you envision kind of a big picture plan around SEL programming, and then you're just going to try to find the money to fund it. So you don't see like a grant fund like that. You don't see like the pot we have, this is what we're going to do, and here comes 22,000 extra dollars. We can do more.
No, that's exactly what I do see.
Yeah, because that,
Because
okay.
ESSER is short term, ESSER is only 2-year funding. So we have to balance all kinds of things. So if we say, here's our big picture plan for SEL and say it includes staffing, we can't just say we're paying for staffing with ESSER. So we have to say, what are we going to do in 2 years to ensure we can maintain these decisions in their general funds in the regular budget? So all of these pieces. So yes, is this 20,000 a wonderful surprise? We didn't know we were going to get that money. But what I'm saying is that there's a plan for SEL, even if that 20,000 didn't happen, there would be a plan for SEL. We don't say we have a plan for literacy and now we got $20,000 extra, so our literacy plan is going to change. Like we
No,
have a
exactly.
plan.
But you would say, I would hope you would say, we got an extra 20,000 for literacy. We're buying books we didn't think we could afford.
Perhaps,
right?
yeah, of course,
Right.
of course.
So,
But
well,
I thought
hopefully,
that she
because
was
otherwise
specifically
all you're
asking
doing
about
is
staffing. I thought the
used to have
question
this
was more about staffing. So that's why I made that comment.
My concern is that always that when you get extra funds, it's just replacing money and freeing it up for somewhere else, right?
No, I was
because
specifically
that's
talking about staffing.
I would hope that's, you know, if we get $20,000 towards mental health, in my perfect world, you know, that would be to get something extra that you wouldn't otherwise be able to afford, you know, something short term, right? Because you may not have it in the budget in the next 5 years. That would be an example of like that extra PD, right? Something
and that's
that,
why they give you the whole list, right? Of things that are eligible for that money.
Right. So, okay. The second question I had, and maybe there's no answer yet, is as you talk about the SEL planning, is there a team in place that's going to be leading that effort to build whatever programming you're talking about? Or is that still the administrative team?
Because right now I'm talking about staffing.
Okay, so your SEL team members aren't part of the planning group?
Not as far as staffing. I was talking about staffing plan. That's why I said I apologize if I misspoke, because I was talking about staffing.
But how do you make a staffing plan without knowing what the SEL programming plan is? How do you know what staff you need without knowing what you're going to be doing?
Because I worked with building principals and we talked about needs in the buildings and projected staffing for next year.
Right, but that's two different things, right? SEL programming. You think that's a staffing question? Like, how do you know what staffing you need without having had
we know how many reading
plan?
teachers we need. We know how many reading teachers we need without nailing down what reading program we're going to use.
But you know how much reading teaching you're going to be doing so that you know how many teachers you need, right? What am I missing?
So I think
I'm not sure. So maybe it's just a question for offline, because I'm not sure I'm connecting with what you're asking me.
because they could use the 20,000 for something other than staffing.
Right, that was a separate piece. Yeah, so that's on top of.
Yeah, I guess I've gone on talk. Maybe I'm in the wrong space for this question then, because I'm wondering how a plan is being, how you're making staffing decisions without having a plan. And I'm hearing there isn't a plan, right? Because the strategic plan hasn't come together yet, or I'm just wondering how that's happening, right? I'm sitting here thinking, how is this happening?
I think what she's saying is that, okay, so once the strategic plan comes out, then she'll have a better idea of what to do with the extra 20,000.
Okay.
I mean, that's part of it. But as far as staffing plans, you have to have preliminary projections for staffing. You can't wait until June to do that.
I think where this question is coming from was you saying, Allison, that you started talking about kind of the big picture of SEL being a priority and putting together sort of a plan. I think that's the word you used, right? A plan around SEL and mental health. But now you're saying what you're really talking about is staff decisions. But if you don't have that plan of what that SEL programming is looking like, how do you know who you need to hire and how you're going to utilize them? So this just might not be the right forum.
Because we see student needs in the same way that we know we need to hire more interventionists because kids have learning gaps. Just because we don't have our entire literacy professional development plan done or our strategic plan done, we know that Glendale-River Hills has priorities in math, reading, staff engagement, social emotional learning. We know that even though the strategic plan isn't finished. And so we have to make preliminary staffing decisions or projections. We can't just wait until that strategic plan is done.
So you're making it based on SEL as a priority, but not an SEL plan. You're making staffing projections based on knowing you want to prioritize SEL, but it's not based on a specific plan yet because that isn't done. I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You can dive in
Thank
more
you.
when we get our staff update.
All right. Thank you. Sorry to be in outer space.
All right. Is there any other visitor participation? I don't think so. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
All
Thank
right.
you, everybody.
All right. See you guys.